Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, taking issue with Batman Eternal. When we last left this series, no sooner had Deacon Blackfire opened a portal to hell than the Spectre finally emerged to close it. But he didn't do anything about the subsequent destruction of Arkham Asylum, or the resultant trapping or deaths of several inmates. The trapped, however, included Alfred Pennyworth and Batwing. Batman had just saved an airplane from crashing when the cops arrived at the scene to arrest him. To avoid that, of course, Batman dove into the chasm of what used to be the asylum, encountering Joker's daughter, sporting a brand new explosive vest, and pressing the detonator. Now, because I've probably been a bit too on edge lately, I've decided to calm myself a little by indulging in some wine. I don't normally drink, but wine is purported to be fairly healthy, so I'll give it a shot after I sift through some choices. No. Nah. We could be here a while.
Issue 31, Ray Fawkes scripting, has Alfred trapped in the rubble, hallucinating a lieutenant from his past that reminds him of the pyramid of survival. The first foundation is the will to survive. The second layer is knowledge. The third is training. Then Bane comes by to liberate him. I missed asking this question before, but why does he keep his mask on in the asylum? I'm sure it's so readers will recognize him. It is one of his more prominent features, but it just seems like they would take it away once he got locked up. Not a big deal, though. So, the giant hole where the giant loony bin used to be is still surrounded by firefighters, emergency personnel, and cops that tried to arrest Batman. Julia, monitoring the situation, is mapping out an escape route through the tunnels, though is unsure if bats can even hear her. A firefighter reaches for someone climbing out and gets a cold handshake from Mr. Freeze.
You see, that's a dang shame. It doesn't quite qualify for a cold shoulder joke. You just hate to see that.
To Joker's daughter's surprise and our disappointment, she does not explode. Batman knocks her out and discovers the vest is essentially covered in modeling clay. Julia alerts him to some ground-level troubles like Freeze, Mr. Zsasz, and Clayface. Bullock calls in for snipers with ammo for supercriminals and orders the rescue crews back as 3 inmates begin their rampage. Batman arrives to stop Clayface, telling Penny 2 to concern herself with her father. She discovers that Alfred's records were tampered with, and Batman had a feeling, telling her to track him down, find Hush, and elevate Riddler's prioritization as well.
He had a feeling, huh? Seems painfully convenient. Feels like the writers forgot that Batman didn't know about the transfer in the first place, but at the same time didn't want him to seem too clueless. They're trying to have it both ways, no matter how ridiculous it might be.
Understandably, Julia is a tad overwhelmed while Batman takes down Zsasz. Bullock refuses to clear any assault on the vigilante, to the objection of one of the officers taking aim. There's still Freeze and the Imperceptible Man to contend with at least, while Julia sets satellites to look for Hush. So that one obscure villain that met with Penguin that one time got locked up off-panel. A splash page shows Batman with heat-charged gloves leaping at Mr. Freeze. And even though I've mentioned the overuse of splash pages before, this looks pretty cool. Certainly poster-worthy. In the rubble below, Bane tells Alfred he could tell he was ex-military and wanted someone watching his back as they traverse the devastation. Sure, he's hallucinating and could be total nanners, but the big guy can certainly handle him. Alfred diverts their path, and Bane apparently doesn't like being touched. Taking note of a subway maintenance sign on the ground, the butler says he knows where they are and can lead them to safety. Bane insists on leading, and Alfred concedes, though he says he can be more useful than a warning of attacks from their 6 o'clock. He tries introducing himself properly, but his reluctant traveling companion tells him to simply shut up. And that's when the ghouls attack.
Given that he doesn't recognize Alfred, it seems that in this universe, Bane never figured out Batman's identity. Though I don't know if he still broke his back.
You know, the thing he's most famous for. Moving on. Julia is unscrambling Gotham Mercy's records, saying they either experienced a comprehensive system malfunction or a virus designed to mask itself as such. While lamenting starting to sound like Batman, she discovers that her father was admitted to Arkham the previous day. In downtown Gotham, frustration with gridlock causes Vicky Vale to leave her cab when there's an explosion from a tram line above, and Spoiler rides down on her motorcycle. The young heroine is shot at by GCPD and takes off after a bullet clips one of her gauges. She motors into an alley only to be knocked off by Hush, who's intent on dealing with her himself. All good things, huh?
Hush is referencing the famous line, "All good things must come to an end," and the recent addendum, followed by a stupid reboot. Okay, that reminds me. No, maybe another time. No.
After subduing Mr. Freeze, Batman is surrounded by about 31 cops with their guns aimed at him. The Batplane is still attached to the 737 he saved earlier, off panel, and he commands it to unleash a sonic attack that disorients the officers, allowing him to escape. Penny 2 tells him that a wideband SOS was picked up, and satellite imaging shows Hush downtown, but she's still concerned for her father. Bats tells her that between Joker's daughter being alive and Alfred being one of the toughest men he knows, his survival is certain. But as the plane takes off, we see Batman taking pause, evidently still considering a less happy scenario. Another unnecessary splash page shows Hush pulling a gun with intent to kill, saying Spoiler's career was about to be short and sweet.
You're Dan Didio, aren't you?
Back underground, Bane fights off several of the creatures latching onto him, while one dark elf-looking cretin seems to want to help Alfred. Help him die! Pennyworth slams his fists on either side of the ghoul's neck, incapacitating it. No thank you. Now who can stay mad at a proper English gentleman like that? After they take out the rest of the aggressors, they proceed, Alfred explaining that he wasn't Green Beret, but Special Air Services. After clearing some debris, they arrive at their destination. A wall! Man, I never took Alfred for a faulty GPS. 1020 Theta. Disable! Gas shoots out at Bane as the walls open up, revealing the back cache of location NB-13. With the muscle-bound Luchadore of Doom catching 40 winks, Penny 1 makes contact with the still-trapped Batwing, Batman, and his joyously teary-eyed daughter. Let's get to work.
First order of business, sir. Who can lift a 300-pound bodybuilder?
On to issue 32, Kyle Higgins on script, where Hush apparently waited so long to aim his weapon, Spoiler managed to get to her feet. The villain derides her playing dress-up and getting in the way, and that he should have shot her in the head and made her dad watch.
You're Dan Didio, aren't you?
Then she maces and slugs him, though the punch seems to have hurt her hand more than his jaw, meaning it's sturdier than Cluemaster's or something, and he clubs her with the butt of his gun, taking aim again when Batman shows up in another cool but unnecessary sorta splash page. It is part of the usual 2-page spread, but half of it is entirely Batman, which actually isn't a bad deviation given the title spread thing. Anyway, a bunch of batarangs deflects Hush's aim away from the teenager, but he keeps firing as Bats kicks him to the ground. You used to have standards for your little helpers.
True, but if he accepts Red Hood and Harper Row, he'll accept anyone.
Bats delivers a series of strikes against Hush, but the villain knocks him back, just as Spoiler finally gets her bike working and hits him with it. Rather than face defeat and somehow shrugging off a motorcycle punch, Hush tosses a grenade to cover his escape, and Batman dives himself and Spoiler away from the explosion. After somehow avoiding physical and auditory damage from the grenade, Batman asks the young one what she calls herself, but she's gone, leaving Batman alone with a fire and no marshmallows. Later, in the Arkham ruins, Batwing is lying, mostly buried in rubble. When last we saw, his arms were pinned under a huge slab of stone. Way to stick to continuity, fellas. An explosion makes way for Batman to rappel down from his plane to take him home. Guess all those cops who were protecting the area just went home or went on break or something. Anyway, another reunion takes place in the Batcave between father and daughter. At police headquarters, assisted by a cane, Jason Bard hobbles up the stairs to the roof to meet with Hush.
Hey, you're a doctor. Maybe you could help with... No? Just the diabolical plan to destroy Batman? Okay, that's fine. That's cool too, I guess.
Funny how the past couple of pages have been busier and faster paced than entire issues of this series. So, Tommy hands over some papers with locations he wants secured by officers. He's had to rethink some things since Beacon Tower didn't fall and intends to cut Batman off, wanting Bard to spread the word widely. We jump back to the cave where Julia has phoned Dr. Leslie Tompkins, at Bruce's recommendation, of course, and given her dad a heavy dose of antitoxin, letting him rest. Wait, hold everything.
If antitoxin was the answer, why didn't Batman or any of his allies think to give it to him while they were in the hospital visiting him? It might have saved Alfred a trip to the asylum. On top of that, there's likely a paper trail showing Alfred at Gotham Mercy, then transferred to the institution that's been destroyed. How will they explain him just showing back up at the manor? I guess that's just another wonderful element of having half a dozen writers on a single story. Oh, probably not.
Bruce is trying to figure out the many problems with Batwing's suit and says that Luke is at home, as he hadn't checked in with his father in weeks and needs a break. Note they just say weeks, not how many weeks, which just adds to the perplexing nature of how long he and Corrigan were underground. Julia says they all need a break, even Bats, who hasn't been in the cave in days, but he responds that he has caches and safe houses across town. That's when he notices someone had accessed the McGregor database, something Julia has never heard of, so it wasn't her. We take a brief visit to Vicky Vale's apartment, where she's fretting over Jason's condition, not having seen him in days. A lot of that going around. He changes the subject, saying he found something big. Found, not given to him by a murderous sociopath. Bouncing back to the cave, Bruce explains that the McGregor database lists all the Gotham nooks and crannies Bats stores his extra gear. The only place to access the database is the cave's computers, and it was last accessed the night of Hush's break-in. Though, even with the locations, they're DNA locked to only 2 people, Bruce and his butler, who was recently hospitalized at the mercy of a villain who's also a doctor. We then jump to Hush, putting some blood into a bit of a false finger skin, apply it to his actual finger, and use it to access another cache on another splash page. Less messy than spilling it on the floor this time, I guess. While Bard informs Vicky that Wayne Enterprises built the weapons so they would know about them, Hush disables security and takes the caches, plural, offline while eyeing some explosives. Batman rushes to his plane.
Only 10 minutes until Wendy's closes. Need Bat Frosty! It's not a Bat Frosty just because you buy it. Everything's a Bat something when I buy it!
On the streets, police drive by in armored vehicles, announcing that the curfew is in effect. They pass by an ominously open phone booth when a massive explosion sends them flying in a justified 2-page splash. A scream rings out, a cry for help, and other panicked people react to the destruction, as in the center of the rubble is found a lone Batarang.
Spooky!
Issue 33, Higgins still scripting, follows up with the emergency response to the explosion and a statement made by Commissioner Bard. Regardless of if it was an accident or intentional retaliation by the Dark Knight, or some other possibility, martial law will continue and curfews will remain until all guilty parties are brought in. Julia thinks that Bats should make some kind of statement, but he's more concerned with reclaiming the 17 other caches across Gotham before Hush makes them go all explodey too. With the DNA locks recoded, Bats has to manually trigger hydrochloric acid failsafes. He wants Julia in the cave to monitor satellites for signs of Hush, but she disagrees. The caches are a numbers game, and too many for Bats to handle solo. Alfred can look for Hush.
Come on, I'm an SAS field officer.
No, you're SRR, Special Reconnaissance Regiment, as stated several times since your introduction. SAS, the Special Air Service, is what Alfred was back in the day, from what he told Bane. So either this is another writer's goof, or we're expected to believe that Julia was in numerous military branches, and one of which followed so closely in the footsteps of the father she resented until recently. So count on writer's goof.
Atop Police HQ, Bard complains to Hush about losing the men in the explosion while drowning his sorrows in alcohol, saying things are getting out of control. Before he can say that he never should have, trusted him, Hush restrains him, breaks his bottle, and alludes to what his surgical skills are capable of with sharp glass and alcohol.
There's no backing out. You're not done.
Well, yeah, there are about 19 issues left. Tommy says that Bats will likely be heading to one of his other depots, and Bart should send people to slow him down. Since their track record hasn't exactly been the best in dealing with the vigilante, Hush suggests talking to SWAT officer Gilpatrick, who's been working on something that may be of use.
You know what would really be of use? A concise story. Okay, I'll get back to choosing. No. Yeah.
Batman and a suited-up Julia are at one of the caches, which is basically a puzzle inside 18 inches of steel, and could be hazardous if it's one of the compromised sites. As Bats works to unlock the door, Julia asks if he ever thought these ammo dumps of his could be used against him. He says they're a means to an end, particularly saving lives.
Yeah, try telling that to all the families from last night.
There's no time to debate, so Batman tells her what to do before having to deal with DNA sensors, that they'll have a minute after using an EMP to open the lock, when a chopper suddenly appears. An officer leaps out, crashes into Batman with his shield, and through a skylight into a storage room below. Revealed on, you guessed it, a splash page, a specially equipped officer gives Pointy Ears one chance to surrender.
You must be new.
Yeah, that goes about as well as should be expected, with Bats throwing batarangs that are deflected by his shield. The officer aims an arm-mounted weapon, dousing Bats' cape in a quick hardening foam. He strikes down with his shield, narrowly missing Batman, only taking out his cloak. The capeless Crusader lunges forward at his slower opponent, breaks the foam's feed line, and sprays the officer with it.
Welcome to Gotham.
A gift basket may be the standard, but Batman goes the extra mile to hoist you by your own petard.
Returning to the rooftop, Batman finds Julia has incapacitated 2 other officers and unlocked the cache. They probably didn't see her plainly unmasked face at all, which would be pretty compromising for a British government agent. The EMP gave her more than enough time to pick the lock.
Don't get cocky.
Well, she's British, so don't be surprised if she gets cockney. Batman pulls a lever, raining acid on his own equipment. They take the Batplane to other locations, but split up, since the caches are laid out the same way. At Wayne Enterprises, Lucius Fox is shown a Gotham Gazette headline by Vicky Vale about the dangerous vigilante safe houses with a potential link to the company. Given their involvement in Batman Inc., they're negligent at best, complicit at worst. He's told by an advisor, John, that they need to know the who's, whens, and whats of authorization, and to make sure the previous night's explosion was an isolated incident. He calls Bruce, who's still in his night clothes, saying that things have gone beyond the scope of what he'd agreed to. Bruce apologizes, saying that the fewer who knew, the better, but assures him the situation is under control as he accesses and destroys another site. Penny 1 tells him that Penny 2 is on her way to her designated cache. There's no police presence yet, and no sign of Hush. Batman asks how he's doing.
You shouldn't even be out of bed.
Where was this argument when Julia said he could take over monitor duty?
Alfred can still feel the fear toxin lingering, but the desperation of the times takes precedence, and is the only reason he's not livid over his daughter being out on her own. She may be better trained than Batman's previous partners when they started, but she doesn't know Gotham, how it can sneak up on you when you think you're in control. We see a brief glimpse of Bard sullen in his chair, a crumpled copy of the Gazette by his trash. Poignant! Alfred doesn't want his daughter to be ground down like so many others he cares about. As Julia unlocks her cache, the final page, the billionth splash, is Hush right behind her, armed.
Who are you?
Oh, Hush doesn't recognize her. I guess she doesn't need a mask. Well, better get back to choosing. No. Hey, what's that?
Hey, what's your problem? Why are you gonna point all them sticks in stinking story, man? So what if there's some problems
we'll just
here?
close it there for now and
what's the big deal? It's a comic
remind
book.
myself
Just
why I don't
accept
drink.
it. Move
See you next
on.
week.
You're so stupid for pointing out obvious problems. I mean, look, what story doesn't have problems like forgetting things and getting things wrong overall? It's a Batman story. That makes it awesome by default.